Hello everyone, how are we all doing? Come on in, sit on down. So I've had to mix things up a little bit tonight. I was originally going to go live with a truther therapy session with a special guest, but they had to back out last minute due to personal reasons, which is fair enough, these things happen. So I quickly messaged Connar of the Cult of Connar, said, hey man, are you free in like an hour just to talk? And he said, yeah, go on then, I can do that. So I've got Connar with me of the Cult of Connar. Connar, how you doing? Can you hear me?
Sounds good on my end.
Perfect. You were muted there for like 3 seconds, so I apologize
Oh,
to everybody.
oh, good.
Just heard that. Yeah, see, I was literally just talking about how I'm terrible with OBS, and there you go. I've just made one of the most rookie mistakes you could ever make on OBS. I switched screen, and you were muted, so there we go. But it's fine. We're here. We're going to have a great talk, I think. We were just having a bit of a quick introductory conversation then, weren't we, about narcissism. And I've kind of... I've had a rough week. Let's put it this way. Not in like any feel sorry for me type of thing. Just, everybody has to deal with just bad people all the time. That's just the world we live in. And it's kind of, I feel like I've been up against it a little bit this week. I've had some weird messages from people and people bringing stuff up from the past, which is I wish I could just forget about and move on from. And I've had some interpersonal issues going on in my day-to-day life. I've basically just been dealing with narcissism a lot. Like, a lot. You know what I mean? I don't know why. And I was explaining to you prior, like, it seems like the narcissist topic has always been like a sub-genre within the subgenre of conspiracy. There's always been this undertone of, content creators who are focusing on the narcissistic epidemic in society and going no contact with people and how to deal with narcissists. And it's kind of like you've got these faux pseudo therapists out there with the YouTube channels, like who have like clients and they help basically let them just bitch about the narcissistic parents to them or something like that. You know what I mean? There seems to be this culture there, and I've been listening to them for years because I find it fascinating. I'm a bit of a what do you call it? Like an armchair psychiatrist? Is that what I'll call myself? Sure. Yeah, something like that. And I've always been interested in just kind of understanding these things because I am a classic, how would I put this? Naive, nice guy. I assume the best in people, and my wife hates it. She absolutely hates it. I'm like this. Because she's just completely opposite to me. She's like, don't trust anybody. No one's no one's your friend, Paul. Stop pretending these people are your friends. It's kind of, and I'm just like, I'm going to assume the best in people first, and if they hurt me, then I'll change my mind. And so I think maybe she's right. This is the problem. So it gets to this point. It's kind of like, how many times can she be right before I have to change my very nature? And again, I've just been dealing with this all week, and I thought, what, every now and then I make a video about narcissism because I just can't escape the people who are they're just narcissists, man. They're just everywhere. They're infesting our society and they're growing rapidly. And I figured, I'm sure Connor's got something to say about this too. So I'll let you do an introduction to what you think about narcissism, and then maybe we'll just get into this.
Well, it's like I was going to say earlier, I think it's demonic. And I'll start by saying the reason I think it's demonic is because I think that if I looked at my own life as like a teenager, early 20s, young adult, before I was really like committed to the Lord and had changed my life in that way, the way I was living and the way, repent, change the way you think, so to speak. Before that happened, I was textbook narcissist. And I think that a lot of that has to do with the fact that there are parts of my childhood that didn't go the way I thought they should have. And there's all kinds of issues that you can have that can make you feel like a victim in life or make you feel like people aren't, giving you the recognition that you feel that you deserve or something like that. But for me, it manifested in that I would have these relationships, friends or girlfriends or whatever, and I would basically sap the life out of people. And it was one of those things that was happening because I was in utter darkness. You know what I mean? It was like I didn't have a purpose for my life. I didn't have like higher meaning. And so because of that, I fell into this kind of worldly pothole, whatever, pitfall that so many people fall into, which is just that you're trying to find meaning and purpose in the world. And then the pursuit of that can get carried away, just like with anything. Like, okay, you want to experience something new, so you try drugs. But then next thing you know, you get carried away and then you're like an addict on the street and you're devastated. And I think that with narcissism, it's the same thing. It's like it begins with somebody having a weakness or a trauma or some kind of an insecurity. And their experiences in life will compound on that and create some sort of a like a defense mechanism. And the defense mechanism often manifests as this sort of like, militant assertion that they are super important because they don't want to accept any of their own shortcomings. It's like
Mm.
um, an overcorrection instead of becoming, self-reflecting and saying, where is the line between what I'm responsible for and then where I am actually experiencing something outside of my control, like, and accepting responsibility for what you can change and who you are and what you're responsible for, as opposed to things that are outside of you. And so what happens is these people refuse to self-reflect. They refuse to acknowledge their own shortcomings or their own, iniquity. And then, in order to maintain that facade that they've built up for themselves, they'll act often in manipulative ways, deceitful ways, or even aggressively at times.
Mm.
And yeah, you do see that a lot in truther community, because I think what happens is dejected people are the kinds of people that come to the truth. It's like God's power is made perfect in weakness, so to speak. So when you are kind of not fitting in with society, things aren't necessarily going the way you wanted them to, you're not usually as distracted by the group, the herd, the current. So you have time. And so you start thinking and looking at things from a different perspective. And a lot of times, many times, the truthers are right. They found something that is true, that is counter to the current. And so there's this validation, right? Like,
Mm.
I didn't fit in, but it's because I wasn't supposed to fit in, because they're all wrong. And I'm the one who knows now. And I'm so important because now I know everything. And then and that evolves as it goes on, right? Especially if you're somebody who has like success in conspiracy theory research. Like if you become a successful channel, you start making money, get Patreon subscribers and all that, then it just starts validating that. So you see with a lot of, it unfortunately is very common in truther circles that you see people who kind of get carried away thinking that they're the guru of all, secret truth, the
Yeah.
master. And unfortunately, that definitely turns into a culture of like know-it-allism. It's very immature, especially since um, you see the same communities that are generally facing so much opposition from the mainstream. If you're questioning, the shape of the realm or cosmology in general, or talking about theology, Bible stuff, all that stuff is already hotly debated. But then you go and you go to the next level and you say, no, I'm going to micromanage the the seeking of information and say, no, you guys are doing it wrong, or you guys don't get to join the conversation, or whatever it is. And it's all part of that same circle of, you know, trying to fulfill their own delusions of their own self-importance.
Mm. But I'm glad you brought up the idea that there is this know-it-allism. It's not just a conspiracy culture online problem. It's an online problem. It's a YouTube
Sure.
problem. It's generally just a online personality problem. You get these people who get fandoms, let's say, or a large subscriber base, or basically start a cult of sorts. No offense, but and they tend to get a bit carried away with themselves, and then they start to believe some of their own nonsense, and then it very much becomes, well, I have this many people who believe what I say, therefore I must be right, and that feedback loop of validation can essentially end up giving otherwise innocent people narcissistic tendencies. So these people might start off with a small channel with good intentions, and then they turn into somebody who's got a little bit narcissistic. And I'm always making sure I'm trying to check myself with that problem, because I've always been aware of the narcissist issue. I remember when I first came to YouTube, I kind of went to war with somebody, and he was called Stephen Christopher. And it was petty, it was stupid, it was naive. I was on fire for the Lord of New Christian, and I was angry with this guy who was going out there saying he is Jesus, basically. He's Stephen Christ, he would call himself, Lord Stephen Christ. And he had his own logo, which he got some of his acolytes to tattoo onto their chest. It was really weird.
Sounds infuriating.
But he was
And
he was very narcissistic, and I just didn't like it, you know what I mean? I was attacking him, but and it's kind of... He actually passed away. This is the thing. This is the weird thing. I wasn't saying I was a perfect person when I came to YouTube either, in a way, before I was saved. And you were mentioning earlier, I think we all kind of got infected a little bit with narcissism. It's like a disease that's kind of spreading rampantly through the secular world. And Christians aren't immune to it, but I think we do have a better immune system when it comes to defending ourselves against it, because we have a bit more perspective on kind of the spiritual nature of reality and the wars we're up against, Ephesians 6:12 type of stuff. But it's kind of, I recall what I used to be before I was saved, and I don't like that person. And it was very much a hurt individual out for themselves who is selfish and was willing to step on other people to get ahead without any remorse, because that's just the way the world works. Suck it up, you know what I mean? It's that kind of inbuilt, ingrained attitude. And again, I've always, since I've been saved, I've been on YouTube, I kind of hated what I did in the early days, that whole shill hunting, holier than thou. It was like a remnant of my old life that I still needed to kind of burn away. And in a way, I'm kind of glad I had to take a 5-year break. Like I was forced to for work, because I think that 5 years gave me a chance to touch some grass, basically, and kind of get humbled. So what I ended up doing was working at a supermarket, stacking shelves, basic, and then obviously I became a manager, which is when they said, you can't have this channel anymore. But I realized in those 5 years, I gained a lot of perspective and I learned a lot. And it gave me a chance to figure out who I am in Jesus and what it means to live in the world with people, normal people, because I met hundreds of people, thousands of people every day of all walks of life, you know what I mean? I had to interact with them, and it's kind of, you lose that perspective online, I think, when you're not with people very often, because we're quite isolated, I think it's quite, and when you have a public job, I really do think that can help people maybe gain some understanding that, there's some bad people out there, but also there's some good people out there, and it's kind of, we're all kind of struggling, we've all got problems, we're all kind of dealing with stuff. And when I came back to YouTube, I think I came back a lot calmer, and I'm not really looking to attack anybody, and I'm not really looking to become a cult of personality either. It's that kind of, so in a way, I feel like the narcissism kind of got dealt with, and I'm always trying to check myself all the time to make sure I don't fall back into that way of being that way, because it's all too easy in this world. And this is the problem I found, that since I've been forgiving, loving, and trying to walk in a Christ-like way, I've been attacked more than ever by real hardcore, petty, jealous, narcissistic types who want to literally destroy me. And it's like, you can tell, like, they hate me. And it's
a strange thing too.
It's
like they really don't know you, right? Like,
well, exactly, yeah.
I don't even know you, right? We barely had much time to talk at all. But I think what happens is, right, people get exposed to your channel and they see like what you've put out and they decide, I've got a good picture of what that guy's all about. And then they finish in their mind some profile of what they've decided about who you are as a person. And that's more of that narcissism thing. It's this idea that they possess the ability to fill in your entire life, to write the whole story for who you are and where you've been and what you've been through without having had any real time to know that stuff, right? Like, how can they know that you have gone through this journey of self-reflection, time away from the platform to reevaluate who you are, whether it was forced upon you or whether it was by choice? These are sometimes the most important things. I think about how when I was real young, maybe like 2010, 12, I was, 16, whatever. And I used to do like screamo, metalcore music, and I would go on YouTube and make cover songs like screaming, and I was into all kinds of weird dumb stuff back then, but like I took many years off of YouTube from back then to where I came back in today, and during all those years were like my worst years, like my teenage years, my young adult years. This is just an a-hole. And so when you have time away to self-reflect, it can actually be super important. If I'd have been on YouTube all that time, I might be today perhaps well known, but I would be totally in that same groove of like trying to self-validate my bad behavior with more bad behavior, and like chasing the dragon of reactions that you see. It's, our culture's only gotten worse in this way, where we're celebrated for acting terrible, and so that totally feeds right into the minds of these narcissists, because their inclination is to act selfishly and terribly, and then they're celebrated for it. It just helps compound that bad behavior. So I'm grateful. Sometimes getting away is good for you, getting a chance to self-reflect. It's vital.
I think so, but this is the issue. It seems like what I'm talking about here is good people at their core can end up slightly narcissistic or with narcissistic tendencies just because that's the way the world makes them become to survive, basically. But then I do think there is this other issue, a demonic problem, where there are just people out there that are like that. And it's nothing to do with the world. That's who they are. And they haven't caught the disease of narcissism. It is their personality trait. And it's like there is this dark triad issue out there of psychopathy, sociopathy, and narcissism, where you have these people out there who they don't have a real person like we do, or I wouldn't say soul. I don't say people are soulless. I would never go that far. I'm not that type of guy, you know what I mean? But they don't have a persona or a sense of self like somebody who has gotten to know their self and self-reflect has, like a normal person can do, with an inner monologue type of thing. And someone who's humbly trying to be good and do the best they can, may make mistakes, has guilt when they do make mistakes or hurt other people. They just don't have that. It's kind of, they never have it, and it's alien to them to consider that. So what they do is they pretend, and they kind of blend in, and they get put on a mask, in a sense. And sadly, people don't discover that that person they may be married or became friends with or work with or have become the boss who's hired them or whatever. They don't realize that that's what they've got themselves in a relationship with until maybe 9 months later, when the mask slips. And it's kind of like, my God, what have I done? Who is this? What's going on? I'm trapped, you know? And you find that there is this phenomenon, like I said, online, of there's like thousands of channels out there now of like therapists helping people deal with narcissistic abuse from real vicious people, like, who want to hurt other people. Vampires of a sort, who literally drain people of their resources and energy for their own sustenance and spit them out when they're done and move on to the next target, and just keep doing that, never looking back, never once reflecting, or never once considering that what they did was wrong, because that's what they need to do to survive. And these people, it's kind of, I've learned the hard way and the right way, again, maybe through encounters with Stephen Christopher years ago. You know, once you take off their mask, they're like a feral animal backed into a corner. You're in danger. Like if you interrupt their pattern or their kind of image, they see that as an existential threat to their very existence. They don't just see that as, well, that guy was a bit of a dick. They don't see it like that. They see, you're an enemy. You're trying to kill me. I have to kill you first. That's literally how they think. They don't, because what you're doing to them is, I survive in the world with this persona.
Ego.
Yeah, you have exposed it as a fraud. You are jeopardizing my very survival. So they see you as a true threat that needs to be eliminated. And once you're in their target, God help you. And I think God did help me in a very great way. And it kind of, I think he got distracted by somebody else, luckily, and he shifted focus, and it's kind of, I got out of that narcissistic crosshair, you know. And I never told anybody this, but I did have a weird moment. You know, God kind of talks to you in dreams. But this Stephen Christopher guy, I think he died in like 2019. I didn't know this until I came back to YouTube. I didn't know anything about it. But I do remember having a dream around that time. So this is only in hindsight. So I realize at the time I thought the dream was odd. In this dream, I was in a field which was behind a house I used to live in years ago. And I remember seeing Stephen there and shaking his hand and saying, "No hard feelings." He was like, "Yeah, it's cool." And that was it. And that was wild. That was odd. I don't know why I had that dream, because I hadn't thought about the guy in years. But I'd always had this fear in the back of my mind, like, he's going to get me. He could just turn up at my house at any moment. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's that type of, you always have that fear in the back of your mind. It's kind of like, once this person's got you, he's got you. You know, it might not be now, it might be in 30 years' time, it might be in 3 weeks, but they're coming for you. It's that type of fear, you know what I mean? But then I had this dream which kind of helped me let go of the fear. And I only realized like 3 years after having this dream, he had died. So maybe that dream was like something odd was happening there. You know, I only think about this in hindsight, but it's talk about spiritual nature of reality. That kind of stuck with me. And since then, since that time in that 5-year hiatus, I have worked for sociopaths, narcissists, and psychopaths who have actively tried to destroy me. simply because I was just being a nice guy that people liked. And you know what the issue was? I was a threat to their promotion. It's that simple. People like him
Wrong
more
place,
than
wrong time, right?
it's like people like him more than they like me. Therefore, they're going to hire him over me for the next promotion. So they try to do everything they can to frame you as a bad guy. And I got accused of theft. I got accused of all sorts of things, which I proved unequivocally false very easily. But they dragged me through the mud to get there. Disciplinary hearings, being fired for like 3 months on suspension, the stress while my wife was third term pregnant. Proper violent, horrible stuff. False accusations. Anything they could do to quite literally destroy me just by being there. Do you know what I mean? Just by being in their store, being moved there from another store, I was on their territory and I was in their way. It's something as simple as that. And that's just corporate life. I imagine thousands of people are dealing with that same problem on a daily basis. Good people are getting trampled on by narcissists on every level, in every corner, in every facet of reality, all the time. And the problem is, good people don't know how bad people can be. They don't understand. And that's something we have to kind of learn, which is why I want to have these kind of conversations. And it's something we all learn the hard way. But like, because I'm naturally just a nice guy, I assume who I'm talking to is the same. And that's the first mistake. There's always the first mistake, Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Well, this is something I always say about myself. And maybe this is something where you and I differ in a way, but I've always kind of thought of myself like I have the mind of Batman. Like I understand evil so well. And so for me, it's always been kind of to my benefit because when I was living in darkness, I knew how to manipulate people. It wasn't like I was doing it because I was crazy. I was doing it because it worked. That doesn't necessarily make it right. But what I'm getting at is that, I totally understand the mind of what you're explaining about yourself, which is that like, it's not within you to abuse people and mistreat people and lie to people and deceive people. And so it's almost like going through life, you kind of are constantly surprised to find that people are capable of such wretchedness and darkness because it's just never been present in you, even in darkness in the world and living through your experiences. You never really wanted to harm anybody. And I'm sure you're the kind of guy who'd like give the shirt off your back to someone in need. And so that is a very different kind of person than someone who is just solely focused on trying to, advance their own cause. And when you meet people like that, and you do meet people like that everywhere, especially the higher you go in anything, like you said, you became manager. And so once you start getting into upper levels of authority, you start running into people who are seeking power. Narcissists are always looking for positions of authority and power. Mm-hmm. So you see that in these institutions. Like, I don't know firsthand, but obviously you hear a lot of these stories. The United States military is very much this way. And a lot of, regular recruit type guys end up getting like their whole lives actually destroyed in order for other people to get promotions and stuff. That you're sacrificed on the altar of whatever the statistic needs to be in order for that. And they don't care about you as a person. It's a huge contrast. I think it's one of the things that I go back to. And I think I even mentioned it in the last week or two in Sunday service, which is just that Christ's character is so different than the world in the way that he's so loving and considers all of us so valuable and important. And this narcissism is truly the opposite. It's so selfish. It must be a trait of Satan. You know what I mean? To be so selfish that no one else even crosses your mind. It's not just that you decide you don't care. It's that they don't even come through your mind at all. You know what I mean? Your focus is so entirely on yourself. And you experience this a lot with people in the throes of addiction. I know some people who are going through it, and it's like an absence of thought because they're so self-focused that it never even crossed their mind how their actions might negatively impact the people around them. It's not even like malicious all the time. It's actually, it's crazy. It's like you said, it's like a psychosis. It's like a state of mind that's so detached, but we tend to think of it as malicious. I'm sure many times it is. Like when I said, if you find a way that works and you use it to your advantage against people, that's evil, right? But that's intentional. Whereas some people are just spiraling. You know what I mean? And that's kind of, I guess, like you said, that's the two kinds of narcissists, right? You have the people who are kind of sucked into the cycle where you get a positive reaction or you get a reaction. And so you continue to do it. Or, like you said, some people are almost like it's inexplicable. Like their level of self-focus and wretchedness is like goes beyond the pale, right? Like beyond
Hmm.
what you would consider to even be normal. And even like I said, I can understand evil quite well, but I've always been the kind of person who would like, there's a line in the sand for like what could even be considered human. If you lied to somebody because you didn't want to get into trouble, like people do that. But to lie to people purely for your own gain with no regard for other people and to destroy everything that gets in your way, that's how you become successful in corporate America. It's one of the reasons why I'm not very fiscally successful because I've
Hmm.
never really wanted to step all over everybody. I think that's a natural human thing to have empathy. You see people like struggling in the world and you might feel for them. You might want to see them succeed or do better. That's pretty natural. I think narcissists have a fundamental lack of empathy for others.
Hmm.
And that's a very satanic, concept, if you ask me. Like having just an absence there is almost to me worse than people choosing to do wrong, you know?
Well, I think that it's borderline psychopathy. Some in these extreme cases, if not actual, then once you cross the board, psychopathy and narcissism is a fine line. They often go hand in hand as well. And I think like I said, there are people out there who aren't either. They're just, I guess, egotists is the best way to describe it. They've
Yeah.
locked into that individualist self, all for one for all. Well, just all for one
All
attitude.
for one,
Yeah,
yeah.
just forget the one for all. It's kind of it's like, why should I share what I've got with other people or give other people a chance when that only puts me further back? It's kind of that. What's the point? Why not do the thing that will get me ahead, or because that's how the world is designed and what the world rewards. And in a way, it is kind of geared towards, those who are cutthroat and ruthless do get not only the benefits and the rewards, but actually they get respect. It's kind of odd because we kind of live in that world now where people respect those who are willing to do that. And I think because the world is getting so dark in that sense, even good people will kind of respect the as they watch somebody get stepped on in the workplace, they'll respect the guy who's doing it in a way. It's like, oh, I wish I had the confidence to be like that. It's kind of deep down, they all kind of feel that way.
It's crazy. You know, you see this happen because it happens like as like almost a hype train, right? I don't
Mm,
want to get into the nitty-gritty of it, but recently this guy, it is a big Twitter thing right now. This creator was exposed on a video doing something terrible and and supposedly not confirmed with this other creator. And the internet just jumped on the bandwagon. This guy did it, crucify him or whatever. And without actually knowing, and of course I'm not going to speak on the details of it, but I'm just saying that it's very normal for it seems like the people see a trend happening and it's generally like they're dogpiling someone and
mm,
they want to get in the dog pile because it like helps them feel empowered as well. I'm a
mm.
part of the wave that's canceling you, you know. It's like I don't know why people are drawn to that, but there's a lot of stuff that can be said about it. Like I have one diatribe I've gone on before, which is about what I call the Kardashian syndrome, which is essentially that you've had delusions projected onto you by technology and entertainment and stuff that make you think that you are entitled to a type of life that is not realistic. And this plays right into the narcissistic mind because then these people who already thought so highly of themselves, whether delusionally or not, now they see and like a materialization of it where it's like, oh, that's what it should look like for me. My life should look like that. And anything that gets in the way of my life looking like that is my opposition. It's my enemies. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? And so then, because if it's in an abstract, it stays compartmentalized. Like I just want to be the top dog at work. But once you start seeing like the big picture, like you could be king somewhere. You know what I mean? Then you start getting like George Soros and Bill Gates and everybody else because having $400 billion, like at some point, do you think you would realize like I have enough, I quit the game?
Hmm.
You're 75 years old, you're a millionaire, you're still performing on stage. It's like, aren't you tired? You know what I mean? Like it gets to the point where it's like there's got to be something more. And of course, we could talk about conspiracies about why you might be forced to continue your career. But aside from that, even just like what is it that makes a guy who's well past his prime, like, he's fading away, he's burning out. You know what I mean? Instead of just going retiring strong. Like you see this with like Brett Favre, he was like the greatest quarterback or whatever for Green Bay. And he went into retirement, but I was like, nah, he's not. He comes back out of retirement, and this is after like he had the longest NFL career of all time. It gets to the point where it's like, are you actually like a performing guy? Are you the best for the team, or is it just you don't know when to quit because you have to be the quarterback, you have to be the face guy? You know what I mean?
I think there's a lot of that, the can't quit type of attitude because I have to keep that supply, that attention supply at all times, the narcissistic supply as it's called. I also think in the music industry, a lot of them are still playing till they're 80 because they're not allowed to stop. They've signed a contract which says you will play the music we tell you to play until you're dead. You know too much, and also you did some things that we've recorded and got blackmail on you. You quit, we expose you, and you don't die the legend that you could die. You die shamed and disgraced because you opened your mouth. So either play the song or we'll kill you, and you will not be a martyr. You will be Satan himself in the eyes of the public. What do you want? I think a lot of them are traps because
think about those executives, right? The guy, you think somebody like Bob Dylan, he's like, oh, I sold my soul to the devil, Well, imagine the executives, the guys you don't see. Imagine what they made. It's crazy.
I don't want to imagine the kind of deals they made. But from the people I met in upper management, they don't care. They made that deal. They're okay with it. They're the ones who get there. They don't have guilt. They don't understand what that means.
You see that even in the middle class too. It's strange, like how much, even if it's not like an evil contract, but what people will turn a blind eye to and what they will participate in themselves as long as they benefit, financially and status and stuff. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, money has that tendency to make narcissists of us all, or make psychopaths of us all, because it's a scarcity problem. Like, I don't think people realize, like, oh, well, you can always get there yourself thanks to the middle classes. There's always a ladder you can climb. It's kind of like, no, there isn't. There never was. There's us and there's them. Even the middle classes are not them. Sure. They are wannabe thems. Who are they? We always get asked. And it's kind of like, well, they are narcissists. That's what I'm trying to say here. Every last one of them. They're all psychopathic narcissists who have willingly played a game to get to where they are and feel no remorse for anything they've done. Nice guys don't get there because of the things that need to be done to get there. That's the problem, and that's exactly what Satan would do in the little season. Shall we get this full circle back to what we do here on this channel? We talk about the little season, and I think a rampant increase of narcissism would be on the agenda because it would ideally destroy standards of morality along the way of creating a new world order, a new Rome, shall we say. And I want to read a Bible verse to kind of contextualize this a bit more. So in 2 Timothy, Paul's writing a letter and he's describing what it'll be like in the last days before tribulation, which were in that time probably just around the corner, not that far away. So they may have been living during these times, or they were seeing people already becoming the way Paul is describing here. So I'm going to read 2 Timothy here, chapter 3. But I'm just going to read the whole chapter. So, this know also that in the last days perilous times shall come. For men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection, truce breakers, false accusers, incontinent, fierce, despisers of those that are good, traitors, heady, high-minded, lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God, having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof. From such turn away, for of this sort are they which creep into houses, and lead captive silly women laden with sins, led away with diverse lusts, ever learning and never able to come to the knowledge of the truth. Now, as Jannes and Jambres withstood Moses, so do these also resist the truth. Men of corrupt minds, reprobates concerning the faith. But they shall proceed no further, for their folly shall be manifest unto all men. And theirs also was, but thou hast fully known my doctrine. Manner of life, purpose, faith, long-suffering, charity, patience, persecutions, afflictions, which came upon me in Antioch, in Iconium, at Lystra. What persecutions I endured, but out of them all the Lord delivered me. Yea, and all that live godly in Christ Jesus shall suffer persecution. But evil men and seducers shall wax worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived. But continue thou in the things which thou hast learnt, and thou hast been assured of, knowing of whom thou hast learnt them, and that from a child thou hast known the holy scriptures, which are able to make thee wise unto salvation through faith, which is in Jesus Christ. All scripture is given by inspiration of God, and is profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness, that the man of God may be perfect, thoroughly furnished unto all good works. So there we go. What he's describing there in the last days is basically an epidemic of narcissism. He basically listed every single trait that we're talking about today, as though it's the norm and is the way you need to be in society before the final judgment comes on them. Now, when he says the last days, he's probably referring to the time just before tribulation, which we're saying may have already happened. But even if we are in the little season, I do believe the little season is a recreation of the time just before tribulation. Satan is re-establishing his final beast kingdom, which came before tribulation. We'll call it Rome, just to summarize it quite easily. And in a way, we would see a resurgence of all of these things, whether it's the little season or just before tribulation. Either way, I still think it stands. And we've already talked of a few things that were listed here, traitors, high-minded, lovers of pleasure more than God, false accusers, despisers of those that are good, with no natural affection whatsoever, unthankful, covetous and boasters and proud. It's all there, isn't it? And what we're saying is this epidemic of narcissism is an ancient problem. It seems to be a sign that society is in massive decline and collapse on the verge of judgment. So what do you think of that?
Well, it's funny because right before you said, "Oh, I'm going to bring up the Bible verse," or whatever, I was thinking to myself, "They will become lovers of themselves." Like I was like thinking of the verse myself, because I think that there's no better way to describe the general public today than that passage. And I know that I'm not trying to imply we're looking at like, oh, it's the end of days. Like I'm not even saying that. I'm just saying that what you can do is you can attempt to describe the state of the public today. And you would not find a better way to describe it than that paragraph and that passage there. And I think that that speaks to the overall state of the world and how close we would be to, like you were saying, like it's signs of a fallen civilization, a civilization that has forgotten God, that's forgotten who they are, and a civilization that's forgotten its purpose in the world. I always go back to the Genesis account that when God made humanity, he said, "Go forth and have dominion, and subdue the world." And humanity has failed in that way. That's really the whole purpose for Christ's redemptive work, to restore the world to its original purpose. But when you look at where we are today, despite the great work of Christ, many people still choose to live this way, this sort of selfish and wretched way. And it seems to benefit, like you said, the people who are, I guess you could call them like a serial narcissist or a satanic narcissist or whatever you would call it, to where we're not talking about somebody taking advantage of a situation. We're talking about someone who seeds this bad energy into the world on their nature, like in the way that they actually just normally operate. I think that those are the kind of people who want to establish a civilization where they can benefit. So when you're an evil, selfish monster, it benefits you to create a world of evil, selfish monsters, because then you're not the only one. You know what I mean? You're not in opposition to an upright society. You're the head of an upside down one. You know what I mean? And that kind of, in creating that environment, they have not only birthed a whole new generation of narcissistic, selfish people, but they've created an insulation layer for themselves. Our society has decayed so much in general that we don't really look at someone like, I don't want to give names. I'll just say someone who has pretty much adopted the worldly behaviors. We don't consider that to be a problem. Even Christians today, we don't find ourselves, and it's something I do now, but how do you really know? How do you gauge how to do it? But like, for instance, like you were saying, reflecting on ourselves and saying, am I living an upright life? Am I living righteously? Or am I being a monster And I find myself feeling guilty for cussing because that's something that like it's just a sign of the old me, being like foul mouthed. It doesn't say that you're good or evil if you use profanity. But these are the kinds of things that aren't being reflected on by our culture. Profanity is no big deal in our culture. It means nothing. And the same with other things. I watched a guy posted a poll and he was saying, what's something that we used to like stigmatize that we don't anymore? And there were all these examples where, culture in general used to kind of hold itself to a higher standard. People dressed in a nicer way. They cared about presenting themselves to the public.
Mm.
People wanted to be clean. They wanted to be, you know, and of course, there's always exceptions to that. But we have, collectively lost that sense of self-worth, and we've kind of become people who are proud to embrace degenerate behavior. And that,
Mm.
like I said, it's a perfect environment for breeding new narcissists and insulating dangerous serial narcissists in their current environment.
Well, I don't know what your algorithm's like on these short form content apps like Instagram or TikTok or Facebook Shorts or YouTube Shorts, but mine is so out of whack. I have no idea what I have done to deserve the content I am receiving, but I am witnessing the worst of humanity on those platforms right now, and I'm not even asking for it. I'm seeing some real lunatic, psychopathic, scary, narcissistic type people on there, and it's like, I don't know if God's trying to show me just how bad it really is in some way. Like if he's doing this because I don't feel like the algorithm would want to be showing me these things because they know I'm just going to talk about it. But I don't know exactly. Or maybe it can't quite pin down what I'm all about, so it's just sending me anything and everything it can possibly think of. But I am seeing, let's keep it like conspiratorial, new age people, shall we say, who are the most narcissistic people I've ever met in my entire life, really. And they claim to be all about love, peace, and light, and unity, and all these type of things. But it's kind of like, no, you're not. No, you are not. You
Yeah.
are seeking self-ascension to be like a god yourself, is what you're trying to do. And you're calling everyone brother and sister, but you have no real fraternal bonds with those people you're talking about in any way. You're out for yourself. You want to be a god. That's what you're seeking at the end of this. You're seeking knowledge to gain power over other people. You want to be a witch so you can exert influence over others. Okay, that's what witchcraft is, and you can do that through spelling words, singing a song, however you want to cast your spell that influences people to do things without having to touch them. You're doing it, and it's kind of but if that's just, then you get the real lunatics in between, which are literally slapping peanut butter all over the bodies and rolling around while screaming. It's honestly, I'm getting everything in between here. It's getting really weird out there. But what I'm seeing is like a portal into this dark, seedy underbelly of humanity, which is losing their minds. They have lost it. And they think it's acceptable to publicly show this behavior on a very public platform for everyone to see, including their loved ones and those in their immediate culture and society and village and everything else. No shame, nothing hidden. And I used to think back in the day, like 10 years ago, how bad it was seeing people doing shopping in the pajamas. It's like, have you no shame, And now it's
Right.
like this thing I'm seeing is something else. It's kind of what Rubicon have we crossed here? What boundary have we shattered that suddenly makes this acceptable? What world are we currently living in? Well, the only thing I can think is it's probably the little season, right? It's got to
Sure.
be this time,
Have you ever
you know?
have you ever heard of what they call green screen kids?
No.
There's this term they've come up with in recent times. They call it green screen kids, and it's like, I don't know why they chose that, but you'll see people making videos where it's like them in front of the video. Like they're green screened in front of the video, but they don't say anything. They're just kind of like nodding their head and kind of like, hmm. And I
Yes,
find that
I've
to be
seen
one
that.
of the greatest demonstrations of narcissism, because it's like, what did your head nodding add to the conversation? You know what
Mm.
I mean? Like it'll be a video to like factoid, do 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 do. It's like, did you know? Blah blah blah. And the guy's just like, like nodding. It's like, what did that contribute? Like, do we have to have your head there? And like, I'm just saying, it's just a symptom, like a little symptom. But like what you were saying, I recently started using X, and it's just like exactly that, a portal into like a window into the worst of humanity, because everybody feels like they need everybody to see what they're doing, even though what they're doing is horrible. It's like it's main character syndrome of all things. Like people believing that the most important person is themselves. So everything has to be about them, including when they're doing all kinds of terrible things. They assume there's an audience for it. Well, what's up, everybody? I'm doing this terrible thing. Like, what's up, everyone? Because there is an audience. People are praying for your downfall. That's why people watch.
Well,
It's crazy.
it's funny because I just watched one of the videos that came up. Says, "It's happening, guys. I'm just giving myself salmonella today," and he's like breaking out this raw meat out of the freezer and biting straight into it. He says, "I'm just gonna get myself this Pop-Tart I've been rotting and juicing in chicken juices for the past week, and I'm about to vomit. I have to skip because he's literally doing it." And he's like presenting it as like, "Sup, guys? This is the terrible thing I'm doing this week." Like you, exactly how you like presented it, and I'm like, "What is this? Like, what happened?" And it's kind of all that just for validation. Is that it?
Eating Tide Pods.
Is that it? Is that what it's for? You attention? Really? That's the only way you could consider utilizing some kind of talent or resource you own or have to generate attention towards yourself is potentially giving yourself an incredibly fatal illness. Like I can't. Is that it? Is that because is that what the people want? It's like, is this what you want? Are you entertained? Is this what the masses want? They want people killing themselves? Because you mentioned there on Twitter as well. I was literally just talking about this with my wife. It's kind of, what happened to Twitter? Because I go on Twitter and I go on my feed. I watch people get shot and die. Just
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, how is this allowed on this very public, well-known platform, which everybody's on and uses just like Facebook was in its heyday? And I'm literally watching CCTV footage of people getting their heads blown off and drive-by shootings and also people dying in a very visceral, graphic way. No blur or anything. It's kind of like... And I'm not allowed to say some extremely sensitive trigger words on YouTube, and this is what's on X. You know what I mean? I'm thinking, what happened here exactly? And why is this what's flooding this platform? And look, I'm all for free speech. I get that, people think it's been taken over by free speech paragons and all these type of things, and now it's a place where everyone truly can say what they want. It's been given back to the people or whatever. It used to be a leftist hellhole echo chamber, and now the pendulum swung the other way, or whatever stupid left-right argument you want to throw on there to think you've vindicated. But it's basically become a cesspool of degenerates and extremely right-wing racists and the rest of it, and just it's turned into hell. I know it was bad when the left had control of it, but this is... I don't know what this is. Like, I don't know what it's become, man. I feel like everywhere I look now, I'm staring into the abyss of humanity. Like...
Yeah. Well, it almost seems like it's finally manifested into what it was always intended to become, right? When you look at social media and the way it's developed, they drew us all in with the idea of making friends and expressing ourselves and keeping track of our memories, all sharing these important moments with each other and archiving all of these things that are supposed to be valuable. And then they used this like censorship industrial complex to take away the joy of discourse and the hilarity of making inappropriate jokes. And this backlash is this result, right? Everybody felt like they couldn't speak. And now that Elon has slightly unzipped the door, all of this angst and all of this anger is just flowing out, and it's being propagated. It's like the algorithm knew that this would come. Like they programmed it that when the day came that everyone finally reached their point of no return, what you would call the political left was reaching its apex of insanity, and what you would call the political right was reaching its apex of censorship. And now the bubble is finally burst. And now Trump will be entering the office in January, and all these people are expecting retribution. They're like, we're going to get revenge for what you did. And it's like, it's like you were saying, people are missing the point. The left, white, right argument doesn't actually solve the fact that there's a much greater issue going on. It's like what you were saying. It's very indicative of how, like, we talk about it being the little season, that we're kind of reaching a societal apex of evil that I can't even imagine could have ever existed at any other time in history aside from like humanity nearly destroyed, right? Like right before tribulation or what have you, because you have these, even if we say history has been altered, you have civilizations that came and that rose and fell, and they all had to operate under certain basic understandings. They say tradition is it's the solution to problems that have been forgotten. That's the reason why people keep traditions, because back in the day, they used to have a problem. They got so used to it being solved that they forgot that part. They just kept the tradition. And what's happened is we've lost all of our traditions now. All the stuff that used to be there because it was supposed to be there, it was foundational for what it meant to be a functioning civilization. Those things have all eroded away. And now all we have left is the skeleton of all the monstrous crap that we built on top of it. And it's like teetering back and forth. It's a very disturbing thing. Like
Mm.
what keeps everyone going back onto Twitter if it's nothing but bad news? Because they are mad and they want to share their bad laundry on the, you know what I mean? It's so weird. Like, why would you want to be there? You know?
It baffles my mind, and people are saying it's the same for them. Like it's just an absolute nightmare for them in the chat for something. And this is the thing: what's happening here, what we're seeing manifested on these all platforms, isn't it transcends like political boundaries. This isn't about the liberals are doing this or the alt right are doing that or whatever, or the libertarians are talking nonsense again. It's nothing. This is not like a people who assign to a particular banner problem, whatever that is. This has nothing to do with any of that. We're seeing like a reflection of the depths of humanity's sin nature here. This is like a inner demonic rot underbelly of humanity that's finally becoming visible. That's what it is. This is something else.
Yeah.
Like this is more of a cross-cultural, cross-boundary, all of humanity problem. This is not like a particular sect or political sect in a particular country on a particular continent problem, or it's something. This is like crossing all boundaries in a way. And we do think of the New World Order with this one world nation with one ideology, one religion, one currency, possibly one language, one government, no boundaries, all one country. This idea of oneness. And we imagine they've always tried to sell it maybe as like a utopic vision. And that's how people are going to buy it. I think we're going to get the opposite now. I think, no, it's going to be a one nation united under complete sinful degeneracy and decay.
Yeah.
And people are going to accept the decay as the norm and embrace the decay and roll with it. And you'll be the purge and all these type of things. That kind of angle. It's like murder will be fine and all the. And I mean, we've just crossed a really dark boundary in the UK and allowed assisted suicide. And it's kind of. I remember when that was satire in Futurama.
I know. Oh my gosh.
You know what I mean? Now it's propagandized on our subways and is quite literal bills being passed. And it's law, and there's no safeguards. There's literally no way of controlling this in a reasonable manner or defining who or what gets these rights and so forth. It's kind of, how do you determine who is too far gone or who needs to be euthanized? Who makes those decisions, first of all? Who's going to be the executioners on these matters? And it's kind of, do you put people through a process perhaps where it's kind of like, okay, so you're on the list, but we need to do at least 1 year of therapy first, and then you can see where you're at then. Is there anything like that? Or is it, well, I'm feeling a bit sad lately, and the doctor's like, have you considered suicide? Like it's kind of, is that, and that actually is a Canadian example that did happen in Canada even a year ago where they've already passed this bill. I think somebody went in a wheelchair and said they were struggling or something like that, and the doctor recommended suicide as a legitimate option to deal with this problem.
It's terrible.
And it's kind of, where's this going? This is not the end of this matter. These are small. This isn't a small step, but these are steps towards more of what I'm trying to describe here: a world where there are no boundaries, and it goes hand in hand with narcissism in a sense. I'm trying to, loosely link it back here. And I know there's nuance. I know people suffer. I get it. All right. And I understand there may be places where could perhaps, I can't bring myself to say it's necessary. I'm drawing a line. I don't think it's necessary either way. If you're going to suffer while dying, then that's just, we can't just change that boundary because people suffer. I don't think it's a slippery slope. Very, very slippery slope. And as a Christian, I'm going to have to stand firm on this, that I can't agree with the principle or anything about it under any circumstance. I've lost what I was saying anyway, but
it's fine. But think about it like this, right? Like if we make it our decision to decide like when people live and die, then the cat's out of the bag, right?
Hmm.
Because this is where we get some of the other issues we have. I recently saw a video with this girl, and she has Down syndrome, and she was upset to have found out that in most states, in America anyway, the limit for a term is like, I can't remember what she said it was, like 25 weeks. But babies with Down syndrome can be aborted up to full term. And she was really upset to have determined that because she has Down syndrome and thought, what makes me less valuable than another baby? And of course, that's a whole can of worms. But all I'm getting at is like, look at what we've become, a generation that decides who lives and who dies.
Hmm.
Oh, yeah, and then say you don't want to be alive or whatever, you're miserable and you feel like you don't want to be here. And I know many people have been through that, and many people have survived times like that. And just, imagining that if I, as a younger person, could have easily just terminated myself, I might have done it. That's the kind of dark world that this little season is creating for us. It's
Hmm.
like everything that you could imagine, every evil that, like you said, that you were naive of is becoming manifest. It's not just like a natural process. It's like we're building factories to produce the chamber, to do the work. You know what I mean? It's not just now a temptation to do the wrong thing. It's the encouragement to do the wrong thing.
Hmm.
And not only just that, it's not just encouragement, it's punishment if you don't. You know what I mean? Like we're being basically drugged down into darkness, and anybody who resists it is effectively punished by the overall system. In this day and age, if you try to resist the overall thing, you find yourself basically excommunicated from churches, sequestered out of mainstream institutions, judged, abused, mistreated, treated with what would be the word? Indifference. The general reaction from people in the mainstream who subscribe to what I consider like the state religion, Big Bang and such, evolution and those things. If you don't believe those things, they have contempt for you, right? Because they know it all. We're the most ascended humans that have ever been.
Hmm.
Everyone in history was a caveman until us. And now we have smartphones and Tesla, and we are gods. Well, we're very close to gods, right? And that's the big issue, right? Because that's part of this whole transcendence, this techno cyberpunk nightmare that's starting to form up, where we have, let's introduce robots into our house. Let's introduce brain chips into our people.
Hmm.
And then what? What do we become? Like we take the narcissism that is inherent in some people, and it is built in other people, and then we, metastasize that with a culture that monetizes it and pays you.
Hmm.
It just, to me, it seems so upside down. Like the only way you could build a civilization and a culture so wretched is to have observed firsthand the complete opposite under the millennial reign. Like
Hmm.
you would have had to look at all these systems in place that would, like, it's described that he rules with an iron rod. So my assumption is that there is like a system, right? Like there's a rigidity to how they enforce the righteous kingdom. So if you look at that, observe that, and then invert it, that's like what we're living in now. I see it as like how do you get everyone to act evil? Well, you create a top-down, peer pressure system that prospers evil and punishes good,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
it's crazy. It's crazy world we're living in.
Well, so I was thinking the point about the whole this tie to narcissism, and we're getting spiritual about this in a sense, and it's kind of to first of all, there was a girl. I saw an advert. I think someone posted it. I think it was Rise who posted it. An old Christian YouTuber who's been around in the game for years. And I think he's a British guy, so he was kind of on the topic, And he posted that. I think it's Sweden. The first woman who's been diagnosed with depression is set to die. Basically, she's got approved for death because she's a bit depressed, and it's kind of she doesn't have a
Yikes.
critical illness. She's not terminal. She's not in constant physical agony, just mental anguish, I suppose, which can manifest in physical ways. I understand depression's no joke, but it's kind of I feel like I think the top comment was, "Will someone just give this woman a Bible already, or something like that?" You know what I mean? I feel like there's other ways you could perhaps deal with this than going to, well, I'll just kill myself, and it's kind of that will solve the
Definitely.
problem. I think that's why we know culturally, and why it has for so long been a cultural understanding that suicide is a sin. There's something inherently wrong about it. If you've come to the point where you need to go to that length, it's kind of then people have failed you in a way. The system has failed you, and it's kind of It's not like it's your fault necessarily, but it's a sign that support systems are breaking down. It's not a sign that of an individual sin necessarily. It's a sign that culture is losing touch with reality and becoming sinful in nature. I think that's what we mean by suicide as a sin, realistically. It's it's a sign that, we have fallen far if this is the case. And, suicide rates are high. They're very high in society. I've a member of family who committed suicide. My brother and sister's dad, we have a different dad. He committed suicide. And it was just through exasperation, and he had enough with the tedium of existence, the misery of survival, trying to make ends meet, and loneliness, drug abuse, and the rest of it. He had literally gone down every dark avenue you could possibly go down, and he saw no value in continuing to exist. And that's not his sin necessarily. It's a product of his environment. It was so bad that he couldn't see the point in continuing. It's that's a huge sign of a major issue, and it's always, it's a cliche, isn't it? But you look to these cultures who are really poor and impoverished, these tribes in Africa or wherever it is, and they don't have suicide. It's just not a thing. And it's because they have a strong community. They don't have money or wealth or nice houses or cars or anything like that, but they're happy because they have something else that we kind of lack. They're not isolated from one another, and they all have intrinsic worth to the village. They're all useful. They have a role to play.
Purpose.
They have a purpose. Right. Yeah. And so really, I suppose suicide is a problem of meaninglessness. And it goes hand in hand with narcissism. I suppose narcissists are those who have decided not to commit suicide, but to become one with the darkness and to make more of it and to understand, well, if this is how the world works, I'm not going to let it destroy me. I'm going to make it worse. I'm going to become a part of the reason why it's this bad. My purpose is to make the world more of what it is, a place of suffering. And it's they've identified with that in a sense. And it's dark. These are symptoms, really, and I think there's a demonic element to this as well. I do think there's a spiritual demonic manifestation element behind a lot of this too. But I don't, because I talk about the Nephilim a lot. Okay, but I've never once wanted to absolve mankind of their own responsibility in doing bad things on Earth and say it's all because of demons. We are terrible. We do bad things. And, demons are friends with those people. It's they're pretty much just the same in a sense, sometimes it's hard to distinguish where the demon ends and the human begins sometimes. That's kind of what we're dealing with here. And I guess we're going down a very dark route, but these are just things that need to be said because I am worried. It doesn't have to be this way. I think if a lot of people sounds like a simple solution, but if a lot of people just got to understand Christ, they can be born again. They can change. They can gain some real perspective and get a purpose, which they are otherwise lacking, from God himself. And it might not look like how the world would describe what purpose should look like, but it will be true purpose. It'll have meaning in levels you cannot comprehend until you make that choice to find the gospel and understand the truth. And know him, know his son, know God and know his son and understand what's going on here. And, there's no greater purpose than expanding his kingdom. I don't feel like anything else matters really. Fundamentally, from my own perspective. And it's I feel like that's the daily purpose every individual has lost today. Imagine being in the millennial kingdom, actively building it. Imagine what the purpose people had in that time. Every single person who lived through that time had meaning, was endowed with meaning from birth. It's and they were proud of where they were from, who they are, and what were they built. What they built for the future and for their generations afterwards, and where they came from through tribulation to where it is now. And it's we lack all of this today, and it feels like end stage. If it's a disease, it's end stage. If this is cancer, it's end stage cancer. You know what I mean? That feels like where we're getting now, doesn't it? And if this is the little season, maybe it's coming to an end. Who knows? I don't know. I'll throw the ball back to you. I riffed for a bit there. That was my diatribe.
Oh, you're good. No, I think that what you were saying earlier, it speaks to a great tragedy in this time that we've become a culture that embraces like medically assisted suicide or whatever. Which, because when you think about it, like when you really break it down, someone who is at the end of their rope and they're like considering suicide, that's the kind of person who is like the most ripe to find Jesus. When you have run out of all options, when you have no idea what you're doing here, what's the point of even being here? What's my life even worth? All of these are the questions that are asked in the minds of people who don't want to be alive. Why must I continue to suffer? What is the purpose? Why do I keep having to live like this? There's nothing to look forward to. There's no reason to live. And then if Satan can take the person in that moment and snuff them out and make it really easy for that to happen, make it legal, make it simple, make it cheap, then that's how you get rid of people at what could be the most pivotal time in their entire life. This
Mm-hmm.
is like, Satan loves to encourage us to kill ourselves. I really think that's demonic. I really think that the whispers that you should end your life is truly satanic. It's a dark satanic temptation. And all too many people have succumbed to it in life. But I really do think that the reason why they've chosen, just like with anything else, there's a reason why there's been this push to institutionalize and make that a reality in this age. And it's because in a time so desperate and so perilous, as we have described it in the past, there's nothing more important than people finding the truth and knowing the Lord. There really isn't. And if somebody has their own ego in the way and they get to this point where they're broken down and they don't have any other reason to be here, that is the person who is like the most ripe to know the truth and to learn the gospel and to know Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, like I said, it's a profound tragedy and just another sign of the times that there's such an effort put out to facilitate destroying these people at the point of turnaround in their life. Because if you take someone like that and you show them compassion and you show them that they do have value and you show them that they do have a purpose in this world, you can't convince everybody, you can't save everyone, but what is the better treatment option, right? Like even you said, they should see some sort of counseling. They should have some time before they just get offed. You know what I mean? And that's the sickest part about it is it's no accident that the system that's working isn't trying to facilitate a quick, we don't need any second thoughts. Let's get rid of everybody, and it's this depopulation agenda that you see also in the abortion system and also in the, just in general with other pharma stuff.
Yeah, well, we have to always, we do have to always remember, I mean, these are just stories we're telling right now that justify the ends, which is killing people. Okay.
Right.
So the story is people are suffering in late stage illnesses and we want to alleviate their suffering by giving them the option to choose when they get to die rather than suffering through the death. And it's giving that choice to people. It's freedom. It's autonomy, and that's the story. Okay. But the end result is killing people because you don't know if someone's going to heal or not. And we know the miraculous healing powers of Jesus Christ and faith and what is actually possible, and these things can be turned around in ways that are miraculous. And so the end is never the end. But when you give up hope and faith, and okay, it's over. What chance do you have without any faith? And it's kind of people giving up and not willing. This is the story we've been told. But the end result is death. It's ending a life, ending a lineage, ending someone's chance of salvation, shall we say. And we have to always remember, well, the bigger picture behind the scenes esoteric thing that's going on is we are being run by a death cult who genuinely believe that humanity is stronger when the population is less. Let's not forget the Georgia Guidestones. Maintain humanity under 500 million. Okay, well, by today's standards, what's that? 7.5 billion people have to die? Think about that. They believe man and woman should be one organism. Never should have been separated, and that made us weaker. They believe the more humanity is diluted, the weaker humanity's collective consciousness is, and our power as gods. This is the Gnostic cult that is ruling us. They believe they need to kill people to save humanity, to make us stronger, to make us better, in a spiritual sense. The lunatics. That's just one cult who's in control. There's many death cults with many reasonings behind it, with many weird stuff and agendas going on. But that's just the stories, narratives they're following to get to the end goal. Kill people. Satan's playing so many different factions here, giving them all their own reasonings and purposes for doing what they're doing. But the end result is kill people. comes to kill, steal, and destroy. That's all his job is. Break down the
The
kingdom.
liar and a murderer from the
Yeah.
beginning.
Steal the kingdom, destroy the kingdom, and kill everybody in it. That's his job. That's all Satan's job ever has been, ever will be, and there's no other game afoot here. That's it, And he'll lie and cheat his way into positions to make it easier to do those things. So we can't. As soon as you let death win, then you're rejecting Christ's sacrifice. What did Christ do? He defeated death. And we know. I was thinking about death the other day, actually. So we know Christ as an individual, as the Son of God, conquered death. He resurrected from death. Death had no hold over him. And I was thinking of the language used in the Bible to describe death. It describes death as an entity, as a consciousness, as a thing that's living. And death and Hades will be thrown into the lake of fire at the end. So what does that mean? So the devil and death are going to be put into a lake of fire where they are eliminated or tortured for eternity, or however you want to interpret it, whether you're an annihilationist or not, whatever. But it's kind of like, it's as though it's a being. Like death is like a personified entity of sorts that is running rampant in the world. And it's kind of, the way it's described is kind of like death has no hold over you if you have enough faith, is what it's saying. That's what Christ is essentially telling us. I'm not trying to get Gnostic here. I think you do need Christ and his ability to have that resurrection. It's Christ who resurrects you. It takes you from the clutches of death. It's him who has that power and authority to do that. You have to believe in him to be given that salvation, to be given that resurrection, to get to be saved for what it means to be saved. And I was just thinking about this idea that death kind of is like this thing that has power. Like it's like have you seen Final Destination? Do you remember that?
Sure.
It's like that.
Yeah.
It's like a mystical force that's going out there just killing people. You know what I mean? It's kind of, and in a way, I feel like that's what's happening here. Death entered the world when sin entered the world, and it's kind of like it turned up and started killing people. But that's not what's supposed to be happening. We're not supposed to actually die, because I don't think the physical and spiritual are really disconnected from one another. I think we should be living full, long, eternal lives like the resurrected saints probably are in the brought back to perfection state, but we are infected with death. And it's not like death, it's kind of like we're told it's this natural process, but it's kind of like the whole world is corrupted with it. And we've been told it's this beautiful cycle of death and rebirth everywhere, and the whatever you want to describe it, it's kind of, the earth, the worm becomes food for the bird, and the bird becomes food for the whatever. And it's kind of, he tells all these things like death is a completely perfectly normal, natural state of affairs in reality. When we're told in the new heaven and earth, animals won't be eating each other, they won't be killing each other, there won't be death in that sense. There'll only be growth and flourishing and an eternity. It'll only be the opposite of entropy. It'll be constantly maintaining stasis or growing and getting better, rather than in a constant state of decay or something like that. So I do really feel like death is like a conscious infection that we're battling in a sense. And Jesus has proved to us death can be defeated. The whole death has over all of you. It's an illusion. It's kind of like we can resurrect from this. Death is not truly the end. You don't actually die, is what Christ is saying there. Because Christ resurrected people from the dead. So they were never actually dead, technically. They were in some kind of odd middle ground. There was some state of believing they are dead, therefore no longer conscious, therefore no longer making an impact. It's kind of like,
I think that
it's odd,
there
isn't
are
it?
scriptures that call it captivity, right? I think that it's referred to as captivity in more than one scripture. And I think that the reason why they say that is just like what you're saying. It's a temporary condition, no matter what, because ultimately everyone will face judgment, right? It's appointed that every man should die once and face judgment. So ultimately everyone is going to have to at some point face judgment before the Lord. Now, some people are probably like, in varying different conditions. Like, for instance, resurrected saints they're not being held by death. But like, let's say you're someone who died in the ages before Christ came to the earth. You would have been held by death. It even talks about Christ descends into, Sheol, hell, whatever, and gets these people and takes them out. So, I mean, at the same time, like what you said, Death is definitely like a spirit. It's like an entity. And then it makes you wonder, is it intelligent? Does it have its own goals and purposes in the world, or is it simply just fulfilling a like a circumstance? Like for instance, a lot of people talk about the circle of life, like animals, like how you were talking about the bird or the worm becomes food for the bird
The
and so
food
on.
chain, yeah.
Yeah, the food chain and stuff. A lot of people look at that and see it as justification for like evolution or something, but I see it as foresight, right? God knew that the world would take all of these different routes in history as he designed it. So he designed everything with the uh, equipment to be able to operate even in the fallen world. So even though it's not ideal, it's not perfect, it's still amazing. Look at how all this crazy, foliage and all of these amazing species still proliferate on the earth, even in its fallen state. The world does have its way of, like you said, like entropy, like it has this way of kind of continuing even against the decay. So it's amazing. It's an amazing testimony to God's amazing creation that
Hmm.
he designed it all to be able to withstand all of this craziness, even with this. But like you can clearly see that it's different because of something, right? Initially, you would have had no decay, no rust, no death. And so there is something present that won't be present when it's all said and done.
Hmm.
And that is a huge, you know, it tells us that we're not just dealing with the way things are. We're dealing with a corruption of the way things should be,
Hmm.
you know. I
Yeah.
think a lot of these things are they were it's the kind of stuff that gets kind of mulled over and doesn't really get considered as very important in the church, right? Like they don't spend a lot of time talking about the dark side of theology, like death. It's not a subject you want to hear a lot about on Sunday morning, so
No.
you don't talk about it much.
Well, but it needs to be dealt with. Well, it was. Well, we should. There's hope. There's the good news. Death has been defeated
Exactly.
at the end of the day. So it doesn't have to be the somber affair anymore, and death doesn't have to have its sting that it used to have anymore. And it's kind of. You remember the story? Christ comes to Lazarus,
Yeah,
and Jesus cries. Jesus wept. He's upset, but he's not upset because Lazarus is dead, because he knows it's not the end, and he knows he's about to rise and come out of the tomb. It doesn't matter. He's upset at the effect death has had on his family, at the pain death causes people, not just the deceased. But it's kind of he's upset at the state of affairs humanity has found themselves in, and the impact that death is having over people. And it's hard to see, and it's kind of that it's a testimony that God doesn't intend that for us. That's not his intention. It was never the point for us to die and suffer. And you always have this argument, it's like, what kind of God would allow death and suffering? It's kind of, that wasn't supposed to be the way it goes. We chose this.
we did that.
We did this to, we let it in. We let death in. We opened it up, and it's kind of, and I don't know, is this so saith Paul, not so, this is so thinketh Paul, not so saith the Lord, So there's room for reproof or whatever you want to say here, but it's kind of like, I feel like the more we believe in death, the more power it has, in a sense. The more we
I
believe
agree
in
with
the
you.
redemptive power of Christ and his conquering over death, the less hold it would have over us, and the more invincible we would truly
Yeah.
become, as we should be. I feel like death gains its power from our fear and belief in it, in a
I
sense.
say that a lot. Like,
You
well, just the idea that our acceptance of our iniquity gives it power over our lives. We
know.
believe that we are, like, even when we say sinful nature, like, I want to reject that because we were naturally not sinful. It was after the corruption of the fruit of knowledge of good and evil. Nature is how we were created originally, like Adam in the garden. So even though I know it's like we use that term because it does seem to come naturally to us, I think it's just that we're all still infected because when God restores us, I always like to use that as the example, like restoration, like where were you stored first if you're going to be restored,
Mm.
you know? And the way we were stored originally, our original creation, there was no decay, there was no knowledge of good and evil or sin. We were perfect. So yeah, I think that tells us that same with death, sin, all of these things do eventually they come to pass. They die away. That is the hope of this whole big story that even though we're living in this perilous time, and even though things are difficult and we are kind of trying to feel our way around in the cave, like we don't really know all the answers, at the end of the day, there is still hope that all of this stuff is happening for a reason. it's not just that the world is degenerating because we're just going to degenerate infinitely forever. It's actually, if anything, it's a sign that Satan knows the time is short, right? This is the ultimate proto narcissist, like the king of all narcissists who wants to have the world his way at
Mm.
whatever the cost. It doesn't matter who he destroys to make it happen. And seeing the threat of awakening people, not just people who come to know the identity of Christ and their identity in Christ. I mean, that's a big enough threat as it is. But like we are proof, living proof that God is still working out his redemptive plan in humanity, not just in our lives and the way that we learn and grow, but all of these revelations we've been having about what the scripture really says and what was Christ really teaching during his time here, and then all of the impact of this millennial kingdom and this little season. We're starting to become, I don't want to say like, obviously not all knowing, but what I mean is that God has revealed things to us that are really important. They're part of how we take this faith in Christ and bring it into reality. It's not just an ethereal concept. It's an actual conflict in a sense. At least for us anyway, a battle against sin in an effort to do the right thing, to serve the kingdom. And it helps you to know that you're not just trying to live your life not to do bad things, but
Mm.
that you realize there's actually like complicated mechanisms at play, forces in the heavenly places working against you. It helps you realize like, it's not so simple. It's not something that we can just, chalk up to, well, if you act nice and treat people good.
Mm.
It's not that simple. We have actual systems working. And it's like I said, it's the chief narcissist who's running the whole kingdom of darkness. So it stands to reason that he'll do whatever it takes to benefit his plan.
Hmm.
That's part of why we see the advancement of degeneracy in the modern age. I think he realizes that we're kind of reaching an apex of, on one hand, as the degeneracy increases, so too does the revulsion against it, you know?
It reminds me, you were talking there about, the devil is the ultimate narcissist, or, the adversary is this, is kind of like the king of this world, temporarily, shall we say, because, there's only one king.
God of this
Yeah,
world.
the god of this world, as they describe him. And it's funny because I was thinking of Austin Powers and Dr. Evil and Mini-Me, and what it really is, that's what he's doing, is creating like mini versions of himself and just infesting the earth with them. Basically,
Yeah.
that's what the narcissistic epidemic is. It's mini satans everywhere, all out for themselves, and it's kind of, he's just filled his children, shall we say, who are
Antichrist.
filled with his spirit. Yeah, the Antichrist, the carbon copies of him. And obviously that's coming after the Christ kingdom, the millennial kingdom, which was filled with Christ, and the Holy Spirit. I'm not going to say Christ consciousness because that's getting all weird and gnosticy. I'm talking about, having the Holy Spirit and knowing who the true king of all creation is and who the God is of this world, and who the real God of this world is, and not the universe. That's more of a cosmic, you know what I mean? Creation, shall we say. And I think now we're living in this world where it's the Antichrist spirits running rampant, and the Holy Spirit is still here doing its thing. But we're up against it now. There's like a dichotomy that wasn't prior there until Satan was released it once more. And it's kind of, imagine what it would have been like just before tribulation. I imagine it would have been something like this. It would have been maybe as advanced as this as well in terms of technology. Who knows how wild it got in those last moments? Because we really do forget here just how rapidly our technology is advanced. Because we're in it. They didn't have this in the 50s. Okay.
No.
It wasn't that long ago. They didn't have this in the 80s to the capacity that we're living it right now. Okay. It's only been like 100 years to get to where we are now from horse and buggy. You know what I mean? It's not been that long. And we don't know how long it was before tribulation truly kicked in that last days of Rome. Maybe 250 years from when Christ was crucified or born or whatever. Since, Anno Domini, the year of our Lord, it may have been 200 years, maybe 70 years. It could have been 200 years. We're not quite sure. Gunnar Heinsohn was saying maybe it was about 200, 300 years. That's as long as the first millennium as we know it truly was. Who knows how long it was, but it doesn't take long to get people up to state or a position where they can be selfish and they can be isolated and they can become these narcissistic antichrists. And who's to say we aren't just doing it again? I mean, we think of Ecclesiastes, there's nothing new under the sun. That which has been will be again. There's no new thing. Nothing's new. It's a cycle of destruction, basically, and judgment based on the devil constantly having a go at it, it seems. And this final judgment doesn't come with a flood. It's just comes with fire. It's the end. It's all things will be burnt up and destroyed, and the dead will be judged. We'll all be judged once, and as it is. And I was thinking about that judgment earlier, actually, and someone, I can't remember who mentioned this to me, but they were talking about how we understand this passage, don't we? It's appointed for man to die once and then judgment. And it also says after Revelation 20 that the rest of the dead are resurrected and then judged by their works. What does this mean exactly? Because we're told that there's obviously Christ ends that works-based judgment. And what does it mean to die as well? And I was trying to see how can we square this with the little season, or when are we possibly the resurrected dead? And that means we're bordering on reincarnation talk here. I call it resurrection. I think Christ can resurrect people if he wants to. I think it's fully in his control. All things are possible with God, But then it's kind of like giving people a second chance. It doesn't seem to square well.
It's crazy that you say this, because I was actually just thinking about, how Nicodemus asks Jesus, like, how do I enter the kingdom? And Jesus is like, you must be born again. Like, what if the implication is that you literally have to die? I'm just thinking about it. Like, we were all born here. I know for a fact I came out of my mom. Okay.
It's funny you say that. It's funny you say that, because I have that passage up already from John 3. And I was just reading it before we started talking.
You got it right now?
I've got it right now on the screen. I already had the tab open. And it says,
that's awesome.
It says, Nicodemus says to him, how can a man be born when he is old? Can he enter a second time into his mother's womb and be born? And Jesus says, very verily I say unto thee, except a man be born of water and of the Spirit, he cannot enter the kingdom of God. That which is born of the flesh is flesh, and that which is born of spirit is spirit. Marvel not that I said unto thee, ye must be born again. The wind bloweth where it listeth, and thou hearest the sound thereof, but canst thou tell whence it cometh, or whither it goeth? So is every one that is born of the Spirit. Nicodemus answered and said unto him, how can these things be? Jesus said to him, art thou a master of Israel, and knowest not these things? I say unto thee, we speak that we do know, and testify what we have seen, and ye receive not our witness. And he's saying, it comes, you don't understand this simple metaphorical concept that you need to be born again. It's kind of, you're taking it way too literally. It's kind of funny that that's what man would do instantaneously. But I'll let you finish your point. Go on. It's just, I thought it was funny because you mentioned that verse. It's like I was just reading that.
I'm glad you pulled it up, because it added more context, which is what I needed here. Because obviously I'm saying you could draw the conclusion, like you could draw the parallel, which a lot of things do. There is kind of a tendency for things to kind of reverberate in the scripture and reality. But yeah, it's like, in order to enter this kingdom, you must be born again, right? But it clearly states born of the Spirit. So we're talking about something that's not physical. It's not your body that is going to be the deciding factor about whether you're born again in this kingdom, but it has to do with like a renewing of your mind or whatever,
Well, the point I was getting at is this idea of, what does it mean to die? Does our body dying mean we as a soul died? And I was thinking,
I think that's a good point.
Do we only die once we've known Christ and we can know Christ? Is that when we're allowed to actually die and go into waiting for judgment? And if that's not the case, maybe what it's saying there is, yes, everybody in the end will be judged by their works. That was always the problem. If you're covered by Christ, you'll be saved when that judgment comes, and you'll only be seen as pure, even though you've done something.
Saved by grace.
Yeah, you'll be even though by work. Yeah, God will only see you as His Son, like Christ, spotless. In that moment, Christ will be interceding on your behalf if you've accepted that offer. He's basically your lawyer at the judgment. Yeah. You know what I mean? And he's doing his best he can to keep you covered. You know what I mean? And it's kind of dad's the judge type of thing. But I was thinking as well, there probably is another judgment, isn't there? In terms of judgment of works, even those who are saved will still be judged by their works. And it's kind of, I don't know who said this to me, but it's kind of this idea that maybe there's like a hierarchy even in the new heaven and earth of what state you'll be put into as somebody who is saved. It's kind of those who have done more to build the kingdom, but will perhaps be given a higher status in the kingdom. You know what I mean? Or something like that. So that judgment still takes place. But you're no longer being judged on your shortcomings, but how many good things did you do? You know what I mean?
I love that you say that.
Not how many bad things have you done anymore. The accuser's out of the question. It's more like, okay, you're covered, you're saved, you're getting into the new heaven and earth. Don't worry about it. But what position will you have in this new place? What did you do to build the kingdom? It's that type of thing. What piece, how many bricks did you lay? How many people have you brought into the kingdom? It's that type of thing. How many people did you point my way to my son? It's that kind of stuff, isn't it? But again, I don't know. This is not. I don't know if this is gospel. This is not me saying this is how you need to believe. I'm just thinking out loud here. All right. Do not take this as gospel truth. Correct me if you want. I'm not even saying I believe this. I'm just saying some ideas here to try and pass out this idea of what everyone's still being judged by the works. Even the rest of the dead. And I was thinking, what does death mean in this idea as well? Like, I'll throw the ball back to you on this one. This is a hard one, by the way. I'm sorry to drag you into this.
I was gonna say, I think there is probably a passage, and if I knew it off the top of my head, I'd pull it up. But there's something about rewards being given, and to whom what rewards are given, and to what level. And I think that there's there's a Bible study to be had there for sure. But I always used to just joke with my dad. We would say, oh, well, if you don't work hard for the kingdom, if you don't put in the good work or whatever, you're going to work at McDonald's in the kingdom. And then we're like, well, at least the McFlurry handle is made of solid gold. So, well, you're pouring out those McFlurries.
And it's never broken as well.
It never breaks, right? Anyway, just joking. Obviously, I don't know what if there'd even be McFlurries in heaven. Okay, I know they wouldn't be made of the same chemicals as they are in the U.S. But point is, I think you make a good point that, like, if we're judged by our works, but we have Christ, then our works will not condemn us, or our lack thereof.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that at the same time, like, definitely, I think we will be considered. I was talking about this morning. We have to give ourselves credit for every step we take in the right direction. We don't want to become like narcissists who think, well, I'm so good, the Lord loves every step I take because I'm so ascended, right? Mm-hmm. There's this tendency for people to be extremists about things. But I think that with this kind of a thing, like, as long as we are pursuing the Lord and truly mean it in our heart, that is the mindset that will lead you to understanding and truth. It doesn't mean that you're going to be right all the time or that you're not going to make mistakes, but, having a willful spirit, and a humble nature, so that we're not, becoming narcissists ourselves in the pursuit of truth. Because you can say, I know that Jesus is the King of the earth. I know that he's the Son of God. And then you start stepping on things like, I know it's the little season because blah, blah, blah. I'm like, there's plenty of evidence to suggest that we're correct in that. But who are we to assert what is and what isn't? Beyond the fact, go ahead.
I was thinking, just flipping that the other way, these people who are 100% certain that tribulation is about to come upon us. And you're right, we need to obviously always have that flexibility and ability to say, I could be wrong about this. But who are we to say 100% I know exactly what time I'm living in? I don't know that. I am not God. I haven't got his perspective. I'm just doing whatever I can in this dark cave with a very dim candle, trying to figure out what's going on. You know what I mean? But you get this on the other end, you get the futurist types, or the ones who are dispensationalist types. And they've taken it to such an extreme with their narcissism that they've called themselves prophets. And they've started like churches where they are, God told me that this is going to happen now. And it's kind of, they literally present themselves. I've seen one guy with a staff and everything wearing this robe as he comes into his congregation. You know what I mean? And they present themselves as like new prophets of a modern age, telling the people of God, the prophecies to come that are yet to be fulfilled, and like are leading these people during this time before tribulation. It's kind of, I feel like if we're in the little season, one major benefit of convincing people that tribulation is about to come upon us is that there's still room for new prophets, and that you can become this person who's very important and is obviously getting visions from God and all these type of things, when really they're getting played. And it's kind of, they may sincerely believe God speaking to them, but people get abducted by aliens sincerely believe that they were probed. It's kind of, it's you can have any vision implanted in your mind or experience in this time, And we have enemies that work against us who can pose as angels of light. So no marvel, But it's kind of in the little season, it would seem perfect that they would play on this narcissistic tendency that's in all of us that can easily manifest or be kindled if given the right circumstances to then enter it into the church as well, where people put themselves above the rest of men. Call me father, I am a prophet of God. God speaks to me directly that I am so special. And, that's one thing to with these people who are online saying, God told me in a dream, or he gave me the date when everything's going to go down, or I am a holy prophet of God, kiss my feet or kiss the ring or whatever. But it's then let's apply it to major religions, who's somebody like the Pope in this example. It's the same thing. It's no difference, It's kind of and I think it's tribulation would truly put an end to anything like that if it had occurred. All prophecy done. No new prophets. All prophecy. Right. Christ gave the final word of prophecy in Revelation. That's it. No more. Okay, once it's done, it's done. No more room for new prophets to come and say whatever they want, and say the anointed one is Trump over here. God told me for a vision. This is or whatever you want to say. However it goes, it's kind of it's over. That doesn't exist anymore. If it's the little season, that doesn't happen anymore. There are no more prophets. It's done. And there's no one you should be calling father anymore. We know who it is now. It's kind of there's no apostolic succession anymore. All of that ends. If tribulation has come, done, and then it's the new kingdom. With we know who the king is. It's done. Like the new heaven and earth. It's just around the corner after this little season. But we've had the millennial reign, where Christ established his kingdom on earth as like a manifestation of things to come in the new heaven and earth, like a taster session, I'll call it, something like that. It's kind of I'm repeating myself. You know what I'm saying, right? And it goes hand in hand with this narcissistic tendency. Like it plays on narcissism to think.
I was going to say it. Oh, go ahead.
I'm a prophet of God. I feel like there's nothing worse than saying that today. Something about that never felt right in the gut. It's always irked me in an odd way. I don't know. That's just my personal take on that.
I don't even like to call myself a preacher, and I teach Sunday service, like that to me is like, it seems weird to try to make myself, I am a man of God. Like that just sounds gross coming out of my mouth. But it's this playing off of the lust for power, which is so natural to people. Even Christ understood. It's like I said in the first place that God created us to subdue the world and to have dominion. So it's in your nature to take charge of things. That's not inherently wrong. But what happens is Satan takes advantage of that. Christ understood that people have this desire for power, which is one of the reasons I think that he performed so many miracles in front of people. He needed people to understand that he had access to real world-changing power, not just to change the hearts and minds of people, but to actually change the rules of the laws of physics. We're not bound by the expectations that have been placed upon us by the fallen state of the world. Oh, we only live so many years. Oh, water is water. Oh, this guy is dead. He wanted all of us to know that none of that matters with his power source. When he's talking about his kingdom and the power that he has, he's talking about water? No, it's wine. Dead? No, he lives. And he duplicates things, he multiplies bread and fish. He performs, he heals people of illnesses, casting out demons. He does things that are not scientifically possible, right? Mm-hmm. So he's showing us that this power goes beyond even how we even today believe the world works. And he knew that we would want that power. That's why he demonstrated it to us. Mm-hmm. What happens is people in the modern age get all caught up in the quick and easy or what's right in front of us, and they don't realize, like, if you could take somebody and give them an option. Do you want to have $100 million and be famous and have a big following and be a real important guy? Or do you want to be able to transcend life and death? Do you want to be able to raise people from the dead, duplicate items, turn water into your favorite, alcoholic beverage? That kind of, it's the difference between, you're being sold a lie, right? Satan's version of reality, the biggest peak you could ever get, you still die. You still get old. You still have to poop. You know what I mean? Like you don't get to ascend like what Christ is telling us. What Christ says when he says, you'll do greater things than these.
Mm.
He's saying, and it doesn't mean it's a free for all, like that we're just going to do whatever we want and make ourselves gods, little g gods. But at the same time, he's explaining to us that like the power that's missing in the world, that everyone gets caught up pursuing that part of you, that the power to control your destiny, the power to have a good life, to stay healthy, to look out for the people you love, the power to have security for your family, for your friends, for your community. All of these things require power. And so it's normal for us to want for that power. But it's like I said, Satan knows that, and he's created a system that takes advantage of that and turns us into something we're not. Some people are, uh, like you said, they're naturally inclined to just seize control, and some people are less that way. But at the
Mhm.
same time, everybody wants to be safe. Everybody wants to have a good life. Everybody wants to be comfortable and secure, well fed, happy. And so people are willing to do whatever it takes. And unfortunately, this society has slowly worn us down. You know, we used to trade our time for money for the things we need to pay our bills, to take care of our family. And over time, they've eroded what that looks like, right? We used to
Mhm.
trade our time for more money. And proportionately, that has gotten smaller and smaller and smaller. The reward of serving the enemy is getting smaller. People are not, profiting in the way that they used to, even though the reward itself was still an illusion, something material that would ultimately pass away. Christ says, don't store up for yourself treasures on this earth where moth and rust can destroy and thieves can break in and steal,
Mhm.
but instead store up for yourself treasures in heaven where none of that bad stuff can happen to it. So, I think that is kind of the basis of all of this. People are trying to fulfill this nature to try to be in charge, to try to be safe, to try to be secure and whatever. And Satan has totally woven a very complicated web of lies into our world that profits people who go the wrong way,
Mhm.
you know?
Well, someone here was making the analogy, and I was thinking about it as you were saying it. It's kind of like Jesus Christ opened up the command console and just
Yeah.
started hitting the things to repeat. Bread, repeat. It's kind of it's kind of.
Clicking
But
bread.
we don't have access to that console. We don't know how to no clip. We can't do all these things. It's like, and Jesus is saying like, well, what do you want to do? Do you want to play the game and grind, shall we say, and gain a high profile in the game and reach a really big level in the game, or
Valuable
or
experience.
do you want to get out of the game and have control over it and actually be as you should have intended? You will do greater works than I, as he said. Do you want access to the command console? That's what he's offering, a way out, isn't he? Because then obviously people who could become rich and famous and have all this power in the big house, they're playing the game. And they're unlocking things. They're the main character, right? They're leveling up, as you would say in your own podcast. It's kind of like they're trapped in that matrix in a sense. And I don't want to get too matrixy about it, because that reference is so old and played out. But in a way, that's kind of what was going on here, kind of. Loosely saying. And someone asked a really good question here, maybe just to kind of like round this off. Maybe we start going back to the idea of narcissism itself. And if I can find the actual question. I think she was saying, can people who are narcissistic basically reach the level where they can self-reflect and change and get better? Is it possible for a narcissist to pull it back and be saved? I suppose is what we're asking here. I would say I think everybody can be saved. I don't think anybody's beyond redemption. I think Christ came to save the sinners. He came to save the weak and the ones who need it, the murderers and the people we don't want saving. He came to save those too. He's not beyond saving any person or human. But at the same time, I also understand that people have to put the work in to get there. Not by works. You're not saved by your works, but you have to want to be saved. You have to actually, do 10%. God will take you the rest of the 90% there. Some people aren't even willing to give 1% to change and to be better and to do better. It's called being repentant. It's called having that desire to actually want to be better. If you don't have it, then no, you're not gonna change. And it's wondering, is it possible to get them to that state where they can finally have a conscience, which is the Holy Spirit, I would say. I think that's what the Holy Spirit truly is. It's having a conscience, and in a true sense, it's giving you that ability to reflect and to feel empathy. Can somebody get the Holy Spirit if they're not willing to let it in? It's kind of, where do you stand on this? It's a tough question. Your microphone's muted.
All right, cool. Good call. I think that's sometimes how you end up between a rock and a hard place, right? Because if you shut yourself off, that's a lot of times what causes God to start knocking on your life. I think that a lot of times God finds us in our like absolute worst. So we're doing what we can. I mean, there's a whole debate about free will and all that there, but at the same time, it's like if we are if God is calling us and we're not listening, that's when we're deciding. You know what I mean? Because I think God does call us and then we have the decision whether we're going to change. This resonates with me a lot that the can you heal? Can you change and not be a narcissist? I think totally. I would consider myself someone that used to be that way. Maybe not textbook, but I just lived my life for me. A lot of people got collateralized by my terrible selfish behavior when I was younger. Like I can own that. It doesn't make it, I'm not proud of it, but you can't escape it, and you can learn and grow. And it's like, there's probably some girls out there who would be like, that guy was the biggest narcissist I ever met. It's like, I don't think that's who I am anymore. So I believe people can change. It's like you said. I don't think that there's anything that Christ can't sort out to make right, whether we're sick or whether we're, disfigured physically or in our hearts. I think that God wants to see us made whole. He wants to see us sorted out and right and working and all the digits function how they should, especially in here. I think that God can do any of those things, but I think that's like you said, we do have a say in that. If we want to continue to live in darkness and hurt people, that's what we're going to do. And it's a tragedy, but it's also the only way that we have the ability to choose, because it's just like on the other hand, where if there wasn't an option to do evil, you couldn't choose good, just like you couldn't choose evil if there wasn't good. So how do you balance all that out? There's plenty to be said there. But
especially when it comes to good and evil, I mean, I've always been of the opinion, well, I suppose always, in a sense, today I've been more on an opinion that there isn't really it's kind of like a false dichotomy. It looks that way in this realm, that there are these things called opposites. There's good and evil, and there's hot and cold, and there's left and right, or something like this. But really, it's more of a spectrum. Everything's kind of on a massive spectrum. And it's not that there is a tangible thing we call evil. It's just distance from God. God is good. Anything that gets further away from that gets more and more of what we would class as evil. But it's not, it's the absence of good. Good is the thing. So light is a good way to describe this. Darkness doesn't exist. It's the absence of light. Do you get what I mean? It's the opposite. Totally. It's not like there is light and then dark and there are these two opposing but equal forces that are ever in mesh with each other in a yin-yang symbol or something, and each contains a little bit of one and the other. No, that's nonsense. The reality is there's light and then there's distance from it. And we call that darkness, but it's not a real thing. It doesn't actually have any power. It's not tangible. You can't get engulfed in darkness. The light can just go out. There's a difference, I think once you get, that's kind of like spiritual thinking. People don't perceive it that way, and they get stuck in these dichotomies of, how would I not know what good was without evil to experience it, all these type of things, which is a strong quote, and it makes sense in the dualistic mind frame, which is the world, and it does look like that. I think when you gain this perspective from the Christian perspective, you start seeing it in this even more trippy way I'm trying to describe here, which kind of blows it all out of proportion. It makes it something that it's kind of like seeing through an illusion in a way. So I just wanted to say, but just bringing this back to narcissism in general, I think just for posterity we have to also mention, I think parasites play a huge role in making somebody narcissistic and controlling behavior.
I agree.
There are outside factors that turn people this way. Decisions and choices, abuse can make narcissists. Narcissistic abuse itself can make you into a narcissist or give you narcissistic traits as a defense mechanism. Hurt people, and it's an endless horrible cycle of generational curse. It's a generational curse essentially that gets passed down continuously and causes more and more problems for people. And it's kind of, I think any generation can make that decision to change the pattern and stop the abuse or break out of it and make the conscious effort to say, I will not be like my father was to me, or mother, or whatever it was, or whatever your abuser was, whoever that was in your life. It's like you say, no, it ends with me. I will not treat my children the same way I was treated. But I think someone did make a good point of this in the chat, but they were saying it as though it was a bad thing. There are a lot of people today who are going no contact with their parents because they were abused as children in a narcissistic way. And there's a clear pattern you can follow, which shows that this is really happening to you, and there's real detrimental effects to children being abused that you carry through with yourself into adulthood, which can then affect your relationships in the future. And I think there is a hyper-conscious awareness of that in the new generation now, that the older generations, who were living a life of abject luxury, by the way, in the high days of like the before the decay really set in, when it was at its peak, before the bubble popped. And I don't think they understand just what they did to their children during that time. It was it was like a narcissistic wave that overtook everybody. And I think the children kind of began to suffer for it. And now they're adults with children themselves, and they're realizing, my parents neglected me, they abused me, they were narcissists out for themselves, doing only what they wanted, and they quite literally played us all off against each other. And you start uncovering these things, and it's kind of like you realize I am the way I am in no small part, but certainly a part, due to the way I was raised by my parents. And I think a lot of people are making the conscious decision to break that curse, in a sense, whether they're being Christian about it or not, it doesn't matter, But there's a big market out there, let's call it, or a big pool of creators who are helping people deal with removing narcissists from their life, be it their parents, family members, or friends, or whatever it is. But then obviously you get people in the chat saying things like, that's what this one person was saying. It's kind of like, oh, this is evil. It's separating people from their parents, and it's kind of sounds like something a narcissist would say to me. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of, where do we draw the line with honor thy parents when that parent abused you as a child? Do they forfeit their right to be even considered a parent by that point? Were they truly a guardian for you if they were sexually abusing you, or using you, or hitting you, or beating you, or something like this, or emotionally manipulating you, or whatever it is? It's kind of, as Christians, this is kind of a question we have to kind of contend with. I, as somebody who's witnessed this with people I love, it's kind of like, I think it can be completely justifiable to go no contact. Like, when you encounter evil, you're encountering evil, and the only way to survive that is to remove yourself from it. Whether that's somebody you love or not, or should love by societal standards, evil's evil. Like, cancer's cancer. What do? You remove it. Like, so all you don't get dragged down to that level. Don't partake in that anymore. And I think people can get guilty for choosing to remove narcissists from their life. And I would say don't, because they don't feel guilty for what they did to you. Like, sure. It's just that's my final thoughts on narcissism. Do you have any final bit of a take you want to give?
Sure. I've seen firsthand, less in my own life, but in the life of other people, the same kind of impact you're talking about, how the generational, I guess you could even say generational curse, but even just the impact of narcissistic parents and the way they raise their kids, and how that can affect a generation for the rest of their lives. And then those people can even go on to continue the cycle, feeling that they were wronged, abused, mistreated, and so they have to justify their bad behavior because they were a victim as well. And it's like you said, it's one of those things. It's like the buck stops with you. I think it's one of the most telltale signs of someone being healed is that they had the courage to do the right thing regarding the relationships with these people. Whether you're whole enough and you can handle, and now you can offer something to your narcissistic parent or whatever who was lacking when you were a kid, and they didn't give you what you needed, but now you're an adult and you're whole, and you say, I can offer them something now. Like, that's a sign of someone who has grown and persevered through this stuff. But then also, exactly, there's no shame and there's nothing wrong with accepting that person that's not a fixable person. That's not someone I can have an impact on. That's not someone that I will gain from trying to reconcile with, and I think both of those kinds of examples can play out, but either way, it comes down to individuals have to come to the realization that that abuse, narcissism, things like the pattern of behavior does have to come to an end. Otherwise, it will continue and it creates additional issues in society separate from just the social, relational stuff. You know, you hear about all these people who become like psycho killers. And a lot of that is because there's been this perpetuated cycle of abuse and mistreatment that comes from that narcissistic, selfish person who doesn't see their children as valuable and as people.
Hmm.
You know, there's so many people who don't even realize they're doing it, but they treat their kids like they're objects. They don't realize they're human beings and that they might have feelings about what you're sending them through. Like, you know, and this is just a microcosm, but when I was a kid, we always used to go to the Thanksgiving with the extended family, but we didn't have a very good relationship with them. And I always ended up feeling like judged by them. And my parents continued to take us there because that was just customary, but was it really the best for the kids? No. So the example is like there's different cases, obviously, but the best thing you can do is to break the cycle, right? Like to decide that for my own sake, like I was perpetuating it as a younger man, so that's how I can see it, is that I felt like, you know, maybe not consciously, but that I had like I was trying to fill a hole that was there. I was trying to, you know, save myself, make myself feel good, make myself feel happy. And so I would try to use other people to do that. And the cost, unfortunately, is that nobody can fix these problems that are of a spiritual nature that God has to fix inside of you, you know,
Hmm.
absence and lack of purpose and all that. And when you try to take a person and put them in, it just destroys that other person. And this is how the cycle continues. So it's just like that. We have to decide that the buck stops here, so to speak, and that's for those of us who are, I guess, you know, consider themselves victims or were in some way not fully cared for in the way they should have been. But then to the next length, which is like what you were saying. If you are someone who is trying to break the cycle, a lot of times that includes cutting people off who can't be anything but toxic. And I've seen firsthand people try to do that. My dad was having some trouble with his mom, and it's a long story, but you know, he was like, you know, don't come over here anymore. Like you can't just keep coming over here and trying to beat me down. And then she showed up here and like sat in the driveway in her car for like 3 hours. And it was like, you know, they don't want to let go. They don't want to lose control. It's not easy to tell someone who has a narcissistic grip on your life that you don't want to be their victim any longer. You'll notice a lot of times they retaliate and manipulate and gaslight and do whatever it takes to try to keep a hold of you. But that's the harm of it, is because it's not always so overt. A lot of times it's like neglect. You weren't given the attention that you needed, or you weren't cared for enough, like what I said, where people often consider their kids just like baggage that comes along with whatever they're doing as adults, not thinking that they're little kids and have their own experience, their own world that they're developing at
Oh
such
yeah,
a young, fragile age. So,
I've seen all of it. You're talking there myself, and I can only empathize. I can only because I was blessed that I had a good upbringing, you know, and I had a good relationship with my parents. But I've seen loved ones suffer greatly who didn't, you know, and it's kind of going no contact isn't like an easy decision to make. It's not something made on a whim. I feel like there's these people out there who want to make out like, oh, they're just being over dramatic, and it's like everyone's a narcissist to them, everyone's a bad guy, and it's kind of like no, to make that choice, to amputate, it's an amputation. To you know, to go no contact is like it's like surgery. It's painful, and the healing process takes a long time, and you now have to get used to a life missing a limb essentially. But you make that decision because it's for the greater good in the long run. You know it's the right thing to do. And when you've got your own kids, it changes things. Because if they did it to you, they'll do it to your kids too. And then it's no longer just yourself you're protecting. It becomes this whole other thing, you know, and it's kind of, it's a serious decision. And more people are making that decision to this day and age. And I don't think they're making it lightly. I really don't. But I think there's these groups out there who want to troll and make out that these people are being ridiculous. It's like, who are these? The narcissists who are saying this? You know what I mean? It's kind of like, no, there comes a point, you know, where good people are pushed too far. And it's don't mistake kindness for weakness, I suppose, which is what a lot of narcissists do, isn't it? I'm trailing off, but yeah, it's not an easy decision to make. I've seen firsthand how horrible it can be, and the methods that, like you said, the gaslighting, the abuse that comes at you when you do make that choice. That it's dark. It gets really dark. Again, it's kind of you, but all it does is confirm you made the right choice as well. It's mask off moment, then, isn't it? And I'm sorry you had to go through it. I'm sorry you witnessed this too.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously don't want to like leave on the note like that my parents didn't raise me well. I would say I've been very blessed.
Mhm.
But like with anything, you have to look at your life, objectively. Some people who primarily narcissists, they view their life as like they're the ultimate victim. Like everything happens to them. They had no say in anything. But then you have other people who try to take responsibility for things they're not responsible for. They try to own it all. Everybody falls somewhere in the middle.
Mhm.
Some people had a really good childhood. Some people had like a medium childhood. Some people had a wretched childhood. I don't think that there's like a score there, but I would say that I think I had it pretty good, especially compared to a lot of people. And so a lot of my younger stuff was just kind of like, you know, uh, there may have been some shortcomings there, but that also might have something to do with why I was able to overcome it. I mean, I know the Lord made a huge impact in my life, but at the same time, it's like I don't think I was so too far gone, so to speak. It's the reason why talking about this and learning about this stuff is very important in this day because judging the impact, that this kind of behavior has and coming to awareness is how we learn to mitigate it, right? Like if we can become a culture that knows how to identify this kind of behavior, then we can more appropriately deal with the behavior and break the cycle of abuse and essentially put to rest the justification, or I guess you could call it like the on-ramp for narcissists, because most people's nature isn't to be a villain out to get everyone for their own benefit. And I think that many people are turned into that by the same system that we're experiencing today. Like we said in the beginning, that seems almost intentionally designed, and it goes hand in hand with this whole premise of this little season that you would see during a time like this, Satan's goal to advance things that destroy humanity, that destroy family. And serial narcissism is definitely seems like one of his main tools if we look at, in terms of what has demolished family.
Mm, absolutely. People are making points here. I did the example of a child estranging themselves from a narcissistic parent, but it's also marriages. People marry narcissists without realizing it, and it's too late by
Sure.
that point. They've financially tied themselves in a very tight knot with this demon in their home, and they've got children. And it's
Sure.
kind of, what
Yeah.
do you do? I mean, sometimes you have to just take the children and leave. You know what I mean? And don't tell them where you've gone. And it's kind of, you have to do what you need to do to protect your children in those circumstances, because a demon's a demon at the end of the day, whether it's manifesting in human form or spiritual form. Who cares? Like, you have to do what you need to do in those circumstances. And I think for those who have had a good life, or perhaps are a narcissist and don't realize it, it's easy for them to say things like, oh yeah, people are just banning the word abuse around too easily. People are going no contact for the most ridiculous reasons these days. And it's like, maybe there's like 0.1% of those people out there who are just making a scene because they're, whatever, because they're probably narcissists themselves or something like that. And they love to play the victim. Maybe. But people who make that choice and sincerely follow through with it, they're not doing that easily. It's not an easy. It's probably the hardest choice they'll ever have to make in their entire life. It's not something you can just throw off so blasé if you have no experience in that situation of what's going on. So I have serious empathy for anybody who's dealing with that right now, like on many levels. And it's kind of, I hope this episode can help people understand, maybe contextualize a bit better, or feel less alone. Certainly can't help them in a tangible sense, because it's something you got to deal with yourself. But I think if people realize this narcissism is an epidemic, a true epidemic, a real one, it's a contagion spreading rapidly in many ways, and it's a sign of the time in a real sense that we are possibly in the little season of Satan where he's in full control. And what you're witnessing is an antichrist spirit through and through. It's Second Timothy chapter 3 described. It's a revival of how it was before tribulation. It's the sign of the end times, if I've ever seen a true sign of the end times, you know. And it's I don't want to be that guy, but it's getting dangerous out there.
It is perilous times for sure.
Yeah. Anyway, on that dark note, it's not all doom and gloom. Jesus wins. He's already won. The kingdom's coming. We need to just regain that perspective. That's all we need to do. And in this time, you know, if you need support, you can probably get that from my Telegram group. We do have a big, tight network there of people who are always talking about relationship problems and the rest of it, you know, and we pray for each other there. So come to Telegram if you want to. Connor, you're a member. You know what it's like. You can vouch for me, can't you? It's all right over there. We're nice.
Good time.
Yeah, it's a nice family. I don't want to be that guy, you know. Again, but we all get along quite well, and we have some great conversations over there. So come over for any support if you want to Telegram if you want to share your experiences. Do you guys want to see more of this talk about narcissistic stuff? Because I can go into individual points. We kind of did a broad take on it today, you know. I think I'm just having my own therapy session. I'm venting myself because it's just when you kind of been on YouTube for long enough, you gain enemies. All right, it's not through. I didn't do anything I think to deserve it personally, but you just get people who start to like gather round and do nothing but want to try and make you feel terrible. I think that's just their job. That's what they want to do. And it seems like lately they're all kind of just crawling out of the ground and trying to get in, you know what I mean? Trying to have any weakness and gap. They're prodding for weaknesses in the barrier, you know, and they're just trying to get in there and get under your skin. And there's a lot of that going on around me as well. In my personal life and my YouTube life. So what was that?
Oh, I said they're hoping for your downfall, man.
Something like that. I don't know what's
They're
going
out
on.
there.
It's odd. It's really odd. You just don't realize. Like I said, I'm just naive. I'm just a fool. That's all it is. Like, I shouldn't be surprised. I know enough not to be surprised, but I'm still constantly surprised at just how evil people can be. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It just keeps. I don't think I'll ever get used to it. I don't think it's in my nature to ever be okay with it or used to it. But I'm never surprised, I guess. But I can never just go, oh well, that's just the way it is. It shouldn't be this way. Yeah, but I say
yeah, as much as I go ahead.
I say I don't want to have sympathy for the devil either. It's that kind of thing. But it's like these people are lost. These people, they need help, you know. Anyway, I'll let you go, and then we'll finish it off.
Oh, I'll just say, as much as I understand the lengths people will go, I'm never gonna be okay with it. That's kind of my main stance. Like, entering into this kingdom is the opportunity for us to enter into the resistance against all this stuff. It isn't just an opportunity to have a new identity in Christ and to be saved from all of this, which is 100% what we're here to do, and there's so much value in that. But it's also like a chance to change the way we think and realize, like, we stand against this stuff. We don't want to live in a world of degeneracy and narcissism and selfishness and wickedness. God despises those things, and we despise those things. And entering into this kingdom and into this community, there's all these, you know, various denominations and sects and things set up to try to divide us and destroy us. But at the end of the day, we are all followers of Christ, and we all believe that Christ was sent here to serve as our atonement, that he has defeated death, as we said, and he's given us all the opportunity to enter into this new way of thinking. And to, like I said, to join the resistance, to be individuals who stand firm against this stuff. And I think that's the bright side to all of this. Like, there's a battle going on. What side are we going to be on? That decision is important. And should we choose the right side, we can have confidence in knowing that through Christ there is victory, ultimate victory. And then on top of that, we get to feel like we're a part of the resistance, right? You don't have to dirty your hands with the world. You can be in it, but you don't have to be of it. That's what Christ offers us in this time. And that's an incredible thing.
Absolutely. Well, That's a good place to end it. Thanks for coming on, Connor. Thanks for doing this last minute. I think we had a good conversation. I think it was good. I think people enjoyed it.
Definitely.
I don't know how many people are watching right now. I'm not been tracking anything really. We got to nearly 400 people at some point. So there we go. That's quite good. Good conversation. So guys, go follow Connor. The links are down below. Cult of Con. He did a great Sunday service today. I listened before I talked to you today, and he does a great podcast on a Wednesday called The Main Character Podcast, which is hilarious. It is funny. Go and check it out. It is hilarious. Like, it's, I don't know. I have a good time every time I listen to it. Good energy. It's just good energy all around. And you've also got your Bulge Khalifa workout, and a man's got to eat in between as well. Little food taster session.
A lot of stuff going on. In fact, I'm actually about late to go get dinner because guys got to eat, you know.
The guy's got to eat, you know.
My next agenda, I got to go get some food, and then we're going to review it tonight. So it'll be out tomorrow at 8:30 Pacific, 8:30 p.m. Pacific, or 8, something like that. I don't even know my own schedule.
Perfect. Well, I'll try and get into your chat on Wednesday anyway if I'm around. You do it quite late for me, you see, so I always catch the replay. But it's still good. It's still worth it. And if you haven't already, go check out his Halloween special. That was hilarious too.
That'll like clarify whether or not you can handle the content. Go see that one, and if you can sit through all that, then you'll be happy.
That'll be something. It really was something. And I love what you said. It's like, if Paul was seeing this right now, he'd be like, "Oh my god!" And as soon as I came in, I literally just typed like, "Oh my god." What is this? But yeah, no, it was good. It was good fun. It's good fun. Anyway, let's go check out Connor's work, guys, if you haven't already. I'll be back soon with another video. I've got Madeline from Leaving Babylon for the 8th of December, so that should be fun. We'll get into the little season with another content creator out there who's people really love listening to. She's got some great content. And I'm just going to be doing a few live Q&As in between. You all know I'm expecting a baby at any moment. So my content production is going to drop significantly over this holiday season towards the end. But I do have some stuff backed up, which I'm just going to be releasing, and I'll try and get on with you guys for a live show here and there. So expect a bigger revival maybe in January or February or something like that. But I may go dark and not post as much as I usually do while I'm on paternity leave. I am self-employed, so I've got to do it all myself, you know, and take that time. So just prepare for that. But thanks for listening, guys. It's been a good conversation. And as always, God bless.
Take care.
This Saturnalia. Imagine a world where the truth was accessible and relatable. Where red baubles on a Nimrod phallus are forever changed. A solstice celebration where conspiracy and intrigue carry you away. Experience The Nephilim Looked Like Clowns, the perfect book for your weird way of life. Direct from Europe, this highly rated research has warmed the hearts of millions in time for the frosty season. Be inspired by timeless biblical questions such as, what the hell is Satan's problem? Ham did what to Noah? Was the pre-flood world really that bad? And if classic questions aren't your thing, and you prefer your Yuletide to be extra occult, take a trip to the unknown with the spine-chilling Hatman to the psychedelic realm of demonic jesters. You'll get 20 obscure and tantalizing chapters. No other book gives you the feeling of pure vindication towards your childhood fear of clowns. Each paragraph brings the wonder of Christ's sacrifice into your home. For this commercialized nonsense holiday, there's no greater gift for your family than a guide to effective spiritual warfare. Order now and get that edgelord of a teenage child of yours to Christ this winter. Sometimes in this little season, it takes clowns to get them there. To get your copy, do not call the number on screen, which is being used as a placeholder reminder of a bygone time, and don't send a check to any PO box because this is not the 90s anymore. Simply type in The Nephilim Look Like Clowns on Amazon to get your copy just in time to lock lock yourself away from the world and wait out the pagan festivities.